G'day. Let's talk about that big, beautiful, brilliant ball of fire in the sky, our sun. It's more than just a handy light source for your morning surf or a convenient excuse to wear sunglasses. The sun is the ultimate powerhouse for our planet, the grand engine that drives just about everything. Every single bite of food you eat, every breath of air you take, and every drop of water you drink can trace its existence back to the energy beaming down from that star located a breezy 150 million kilometers away. It's the perfect distance, giving us the Goldilocks conditions, not too hot, not too cold, but just right for life to flourish in all its weird and wonderful forms. Think of the sun as a gigantic nuclear fusion reactor, constantly smashing hydrogen atoms together to make helium. This cosmic cooking releases a mind-boggling amount of energy, which radiates out into space in all directions. Earth catches only a tiny, tiny fraction of this energy, yet it's enough to power our entire world. It warms our lands, stirs our oceans, and fuels the process of photosynthesis, which is the foundation of almost every food chain on the planet. From the smallest plankton in the sea to the tallest trees in the rainforest, everything is dancing to the sun's energetic rhythm. Without the sun, Earth would be a frozen, lifeless rock hurtling through the darkness of space. The average temperature would plummet to something around -200 degrees Celsius, making even Antarctica seem like a tropical holiday destination. But what if that friendly, reliable star decided to change its tune? Imagine if overnight our sun decided to double its energy output. It's like turning the dial on your heater from a comfortable 5 all the way up to a scorching 10. So what does it actually mean for the sun to double its energy? We're talking about a fundamental change in its luminosity, which is the total amount of energy it blasts out every second. Right now, the sun radiates about 384 yottawatts of power. That's a 384 with 24 zeros after it, a number so big it's almost meaningless to our everyday brains. Doubling this means twice the number of photons, those little packets of light and heat streaming towards Earth. Every square meter of our planet would suddenly be hit with twice the solar radiation it currently receives. The relationship between the energy a planet receives and its surface temperature is governed by some nifty physics known as the Stefan-Boltzmann law. A good rule of thumb is that the temperature would increase by about 20%. Our planet's current average temperature is a rather pleasant 15 degrees Celsius. It would push our global average temperature up to around 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not the temperature on a hot day in the desert. That's the average temperature for the whole planet, day and night, pole to pole. This doubling of energy would be like moving our planet much, much closer to the sun. If the sun's output doubled, that habitable zone would be shoved much further out into the solar system, somewhere out past Mars. Our little blue marble would suddenly find itself in the cosmic equivalent of a blast furnace. The change would be immediate and relentless. From the moment the extra energy began to arrive, which would take about 8 minutes to travel from the sun to us, the Earth would start to heat up. With the global average temperature rocketing up to 40 degrees Celsius, our world would experience a permanent, planet-wide heat wave. Think of the hottest day you've ever experienced, the kind where the asphalt on the road gets soft and sticky. Now, imagine that becoming the new normal everywhere. The equatorial regions would become utterly uninhabitable for humans and most large animals. Daytime temperatures in places like the Amazon, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia could consistently soar above 60 or even 70 degrees Celsius. That's 140 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit. These are not survivable conditions. At these temperatures, the human body simply cannot cool itself down, leading to fatal heat stroke in a matter of hours, if not minutes. The concept of seasons as we know them would be warped into something almost unrecognizable. Our gentle summers would transform into brutal, life-threatening ordeals. Winters, which once brought relief and snow to many parts of the world, would become merely less scorching. This intense heat would have a dramatic effect on the land itself. Widespread desertification would occur at a terrifying pace. Vast areas of once fertile farmland and lush forest would dry up, crack, and turn to dust. The great breadbaskets of the world, the American Midwest, the plains of Ukraine, the fields of China, would become barren wastelands. Soil moisture would evaporate almost instantly, making it impossible to grow the crops that feed billions of people. The world would look increasingly like Mars or the Sahara Desert, with red, dusty plains stretching as far as the eye can see, shimmering under a relentlessly bright and scorching sun. This planetary fever would also bake the very air we breathe. The lower atmosphere would become a thick, soupy, and unstable layer of superheated air, setting the stage for meteorological chaos on an unprecedented scale. Welcome to the new world of weather, where every forecast is extreme. With so much extra energy pumping into the atmosphere, weather systems would be supercharged. Think of hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons, but on a scale that makes today's Category 5 storms look like a gentle spring breeze. These megastorms, often called hypercanes, would be larger, more powerful, and far more frequent. They would draw their immense energy from the superheated oceans, churning up winds that could easily exceed 500 kilometers per hour. Such winds wouldn't just blow roofs off houses. They would obliterate entire cities, scouring them from the landscape. The water cycle would be thrown into a violent and unpredictable frenzy. The intense heat would cause massive amounts of water to evaporate from the oceans, lakes, and rivers, loading the atmosphere with an incredible amount of moisture. When this moisture-laden air finally cools and condenses, it wouldn't result in gentle rain. Instead, we would see biblical-scale deluges and flash floods. Entire regions could receive a year's worth of rainfall in a single day, washing away topsoil, triggering catastrophic landslides, and turning low-lying areas into vast, temporary lakes. These downpours would be followed by long periods of intense drought and heat, creating a brutal cycle of flood and fire. While some regions drowned, others would burn. The extreme heat and dry conditions would create a tinderbox Earth. Wildfires would become larger, more intense, and virtually unstoppable, creating firestorms that could rage for months on end, consuming entire continents. The smoke and ash from these megafires would choke the atmosphere, blotting out the sun, ironically, and creating a hazy, toxic twilight. The air quality would become so poor that breathing without filtration would be dangerous, even thousands of kilometers away from the fires themselves. The familiar patterns of wind and ocean currents that distribute heat around our planet, like the jet stream and the Gulf Stream, would be completely disrupted. As the poles heat up dramatically, this temperature gradient would weaken, causing these currents to slow, shift, or even collapse entirely. The world's oceans, which cover over 70% of our planet's surface, would act as a gigantic heat sink, absorbing the brunt of the sun's new, ferocious energy. But honestly, they can only absorb so much. The surface waters would quickly heat up to unbearable temperatures. Imagine the water in a tropical sea, which is currently a pleasant 28 degrees Celsius, warming to over 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. It would be like swimming in a hot bath, a temperature that is lethal to almost all marine life. Coral reefs, the vibrant rainforests of the sea, would be the first to go. They would bleach white and die within days, leading to the collapse of the entire ecosystem that depends on them. This intense heating would trigger a massive and rapid melting of all the ice on Earth. The great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica, which hold enough frozen water to raise sea levels by over 65 meters, would begin to melt at an alarming rate. The consequence of all this melting ice would be a dramatic and unstoppable rise in sea levels. A rise of tens of meters would redraw the maps of the world. All of our major coastal cities, New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney, Mumbai, Shanghai, would be completely submerged. Entire countries like the Netherlands and Bangladesh and countless island nations would disappear beneath the waves. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of people would be displaced, creating the greatest refugee crisis in human history. Furthermore, a warmer ocean holds less dissolved gas, including oxygen. As the oceans heat up, they would begin to suffocate. Vast dead zones, areas with too little oxygen to support fish or other complex life, would expand to cover huge swathes of the ocean. The combination of extreme heat, lack of oxygen, and ocean acidification would be a death sentence for marine life. The oceans would transform from a source of life and sustenance into a hot, acidic, and largely lifeless soup, populated only by the hardiest of microbes and bacteria. For the plant kingdom, the sun's doubled intensity would spell doom. The very process that gives them life, photosynthesis, would become their executioner. Photosynthesis is a finely tuned chemical reaction that uses sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create energy. But there's a limit. Too much sunlight, especially the high-energy ultraviolet radiation that would also double, actually damages the plant's cellular machinery. The leaves would essentially get a severe sunburn, their chlorophyll would break down, and the process of photosynthesis would grind to a halt. Plants would be unable to produce food, and they would literally cook from the inside out. The world's great forests, from the Amazon rainforest to the boreal forests of Siberia, would be wiped out. The extreme heat and lack of water would cause them to wither and die, and they would become fuel for unimaginable wildfires. The loss of these forests would be catastrophic for the planet. They are the lungs of our world, producing vast amounts of the oxygen we breathe and absorbing enormous quantities of carbon dioxide. Their destruction would not only release all that stored carbon back into the atmosphere, but it would also drastically reduce the amount of breathable oxygen available. Agriculture, the foundation of human civilization, would completely collapse. Staple crops like wheat, rice, corn, and soy are all adapted to a specific range of temperatures and sunlight levels. In a world with double the solar energy, these plants would fail to grow. The seeds wouldn't germinate in the baked soil, and any seedlings that did sprout would be scorched by the relentless sun before they could mature. The intricate web of farming, harvesting, and distribution that feeds 8 billion people would shatter. Famine would not be a regional problem, it would be a global absolute certainty. Could any plant survive this green apocalypse? Perhaps some of the most resilient and specialized organisms. The most likely survivors would be extremophiles, simple organisms like cyanobacteria or certain types of algae that can thrive in extreme conditions. They might find niches deep underwater or underground, away from the worst of the sun's glare. The lush green earth would be replaced by a scorched brown landscape, with life clinging on only in the most sheltered of places. Life on this new, harsher earth would be a story of survival against impossible odds. For animals, the challenges would be immense. Large, warm-blooded mammals, including humans, would be at a severe disadvantage. Our bodies are designed to maintain a constant internal temperature, and in a world where the ambient temperature is often higher than our own body temperature, cooling down becomes a massive physiological challenge. Most large land animals would perish from heat stroke and dehydration. The creatures with the best chance of survival would be those already adapted to extreme environments. Small, nocturnal desert animals that spend their days in deep burrows might be able to avoid the worst of the daytime heat. Reptiles and insects, being cold-blooded, might fare slightly better. However, even they have their limits and would need to find shelter from the most intense heat. Life would have to retreat, to hide from the sun. The surface of the planet during the day would become a virtual death zone, with activity only possible during the brief, cooler periods of twilight or at night. For humanity, survival would mean a radical transformation of our way of life. Surface dwelling would become impossible in most parts of the world. The only way to survive the crushing heat would be to go underground. We would have to become a species of subterranean dwellers, building cities in vast networks of tunnels and caverns. These underground cities would require incredible feats of engineering to provide air, water, and power. Life would be confined, claustrophobic, and completely dependent on technology to maintain a habitable environment against the hostile world above. The survivors would be those living at the extremes of the planet, the polar regions. Antarctica and the high Arctic, once frozen wastelands, might become the last bastions of surface life. As the ice melts, land would be exposed, and the temperatures might become, for a time, somewhat temperate. These regions could become the new habitable zones of Earth, attracting desperate refugees from the scorched equatorial and mid-latitudes. However, these new homes would be fragile, with 24-hour sunlight for half the year and a landscape utterly transformed by the melting of ancient ice sheets, presenting their own unique and formidable challenges for survival. Our modern technological civilization is a delicate and interconnected system, and it would crumble under the onslaught of a supercharged sun. The power grid, the backbone of our society, would be one of the first casualties. The intense heat would cause power lines to sag and fail, and transformers would overheat and explode. Solar panels, ironically, would be fried by the sheer intensity of the radiation they are designed to capture. The digital world we rely on would be wiped out. The internet, communication satellites, and GPS systems would all be vulnerable. The increased solar radiation would bombard our satellites, frying their sensitive electronics. All the knowledge, commerce, and social connection that exists online would simply vanish. We would be thrown back into a pre-industrial age of communication, isolated in our small pockets of survival. Transportation systems would grind to a halt. Airports would be unusable. Railways would buckle in the heat, and roads would be destroyed by floods or buried by dust. Each community would be on its own, unable to trade or receive supplies from the outside world. The globalized economy would shatter into 1,000 isolated and struggling pieces. Our daily lives would be reduced to a basic struggle for survival. Forget about careers, hobbies, or entertainment. The primary occupations would be securing water, finding or growing food in protected underground farms, and maintaining the life support systems of the shelters. Society would be reorganized around these essential tasks. The complex structures of our current world would likely dissolve, replaced by smaller, more pragmatic community-based governance focused on one thing only: keeping the inhabitants alive for one more day in their sealed tombs beneath the scorched surface of the earth. Looking at the big picture, what would be the ultimate fate of Earth? After the initial chaos, the boiling oceans, the burning continents, the collapse of civilization, the planet would eventually settle into a new, harsh equilibrium. It would be a much hotter, wetter, and more volatile world. The new average temperature of 40 degrees Celsius would make it a planet more akin to a steamy jungle world or a barren desert planet from science fiction. The atmosphere would be thick with water vapor, a powerful greenhouse gas that would trap even more heat, potentially pushing temperatures even higher in a runaway feedback loop. Could any life adapt and survive in this new world? The answer is almost certainly yes, but it wouldn't be the life we know. The Great Extinction Event would wipe out the vast majority of plants and animals, especially the large complex ones. But life is resilient. In the scalding oceans, heat-loving bacteria and archaea known as thermophiles would thrive, perhaps forming colorful mats around hydrothermal vents. Evolution would be reset, and from these simple survivors, life might, over millions of years, begin to diversify again. The face of the Earth would be unrecognizable. With sea levels tens of meters higher, the continents would be reshaped into collections of large islands and shallow seas. The poles, now ice-free, might be the most clement regions. The equatorial regions would be permanent, sterile deserts of rock and sand, blasted by a sun that is now an enemy. The sky would likely be a permanent hazy white or yellowish brown due to the high water vapor and dust content in the atmosphere. As for humanity, our fate is far less certain. Perhaps small, isolated pockets of our species could survive in their deep underground shelters for generations, becoming a permanent subterranean race. Or maybe the colonists at the poles could eke out a living on the newly thawed land. But we would no longer be the masters of the planet. We would be a species in hiding, a shadow of our former selves, living on a world that is no longer truly ours. The Earth would go on without us, a monument to the terrifying power of a star, reminding us that our comfortable existence is entirely dependent on the delicate cosmic balance that we so often take for granted.